Tom, I know you've taught A-levels, you've advised government, you've worked for think tanks. I mean, this has been your life for many, many years. I mean, surely this rise from 25% to 45% for A's and A stars, surely, Tom, that is ridiculous.
And I think, Nigel, that goes back to the very purpose of any grading system, not just for A-levels, but for university degrees and even GCSEs. The purpose of those grades is to differentiate between those who can understand more, who know more, who can do more, compared to those who can maybe understand a bit less and know a bit less. But unfortunately, the grading system doesn't do that. If you get so many people getting the top grades that it becomes impossible to distinguish between them, then the grading system itself has ultimately become meaningless. And I think that's going to be a problem for employers in future, looking at the students who got their grades today. I think it's going to be a problem for universities potentially. How do they know if students at two different schools who both got an A in, say, A-level physics, how do they know which of those candidates really does know more and can understand more? And I think that's going to be a problem.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. Now, for GCSE, of course, we've got a new system coming in, haven't we, where we grade for, is it from 1 to 9?
Yes, that system's been in place for a little while. We're going to see on Thursday what the results are for this year. But again, there are some concerns that because there were no exams, that the government said to schools and colleges, effectively, you need to figure out how to give your grades to your students. It's possible on Thursday we will see something very similar again, because there were some very minimal checks and balances in place. And so that's why it's possible that grade inflation will kick in for both GCSEs and A-levels yet again this year, of course, after the grade inflation we saw last year.
So it's going to be tough for employers to judge this year's set of A-level results, tough for the universities to judge them too. Are we failing our young people with this system, and why, in your opinion? And I know that you advised Nicky Morgan and you advised Michael Gove in the past. Why is Gavin Williamson defending these results? Surely we're letting people down.
Well, I think, as you might remember from last summer, and I'm sure your viewers do too, there was a real problem with the way the government tried to hand out grades, the so-called mutant algorithm. I'm sure you might fondly remember. It caused huge political problems. And so in January this year, when they were looking at what was going to happen in the summer, my view, indeed many other people's views, are that we could still find a way to make the exams go ahead if the government wanted to, but they simply pulled the plug and left it up to schools and colleges instead. That is in no way a criticism of the teachers. They were put in, frankly, an impossible position to try and figure out, like you say, after all the closures, where are my students right now and what are they going to potentially achieve in exams that don't even exist? So this was ultimately a political solution to an educational problem, and I think that's largely why we've ended up where we are.
So you're really saying to me that Gavin Williamson is not fit for purpose, aren't you?
It's not for me to say whether politicians are fit for purpose. I'm just here to look at the policy out. I'm here to look after the learners and the students. And of course, we did see, to be fair, with the high grades, unsurprisingly, a lot of very happy students then, a lot of very happy parents. And let us remember that students and teachers have been through a terrible, terrible time over the past 18 months. So for them to even get to the end of the course, I would say well done to them. But clearly, we need a grading system that works. And more importantly, the consequences of this year's grade inflation will be felt next year, when we are all hoping we get back to exams, of course. We don't know now how you can reverse the grade inflation you were describing when people come back to exams next year.
Well, that was my question, Tom. What do we do? OK, let's just say that this was a freak year for all the reasons that we've been through. We've got this set of results. They're an aberration. How do we next year get back to a system that allows that very differentiation that you were talking about between the really excellent student and the good student?
Well, first and foremost, we need to get students sitting exams again in the way that they are supposed to. But when it comes to the grading of those exams, we have to bear in mind that the students who are finishing their A-levels next year will, of course, have started them during this academic year when we still had school closures. So I think it would be harsh to simply just try and flick a switch and pretend that we just didn't have any of these school closures for next summer. But at the same time, we do need to recognise that if almost half of students are getting A's and A stars and the grading system isn't serving its purpose for employers or universities, that we simply can't go down that road again. So I'd like to see exams back as soon as we can for A-levels, but I think we're going to need to have some compensation in the grading system for at least another year.
Right, understood. You've made it very, very clear. Tom Richmond, thank you for joining us and giving your expertise on this. Well, also joining me tonight is Christine Cunniff, Principal of the LVS Ascot School, an independent school. Welcome, Christine, to GB News. Was it a day of great celebration for your pupils today?
Yes, it was. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with them. I'm actually self-isolating at the moment. But I could hear the cheers from the window here. and we had some good results, and they've worked tremendously hard.
Now, the independent schools are obviously in a slightly different category, much smaller class sizes, etc. And I'm told that about 70% of independent school pupils are getting A's and A stars, which sounds wonderful. But the point, Christine, and I've just been through this with Tom, if so many people get A's and A stars, how does an employer, how does a university differentiate between good pupils and the really exceptional ones?
I think what we've got to not forget is this was an extraordinary year. Last year was extraordinary too. We had the algorithm, we know about that. That's gone, thank heavens it wasn't here this year as well. But it was extraordinary again. And it's not ideal by any chance. And also, it wasn't a snapshot of an exam that the children had this time. And we all know, we've all sat exams, A-level exams, you've come out and you're thinking, oh, I've really blown that, I didn't do very well. Whereas children had a lot longer period of time to be assessed and get those grades, and learning under different circumstances as well. And as you say, girls did extremely well because, yes, and historically, girls do work consistently. And boys, I have two, are a totally different kettle of fish. And, and I had a son take A-levels last year and undoubtedly missed out because I know he would have picked it up in those last couple of months. But they didn't have the time even last year to do this. Whereas at least this year, we've had the time to do it as best as we could. And I think you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. I don't think it's a political issue. I don't think any political party would have done it any differently. But let's forget.
But Christine, come on. I accept all of your points about this being a very exceptional and very difficult year. And I also understand some of that will roll over until next year. That point was made with the previous guest. I understand it. But come on, in the cold light of day, in the space of 2 years, we have nearly doubled the number of A and A-star grades. That is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, but it may be ridiculous, but that's because we've had 2 extraordinary years. I mean, it was bound to happen.
So are we that much cleverer? Are our students that much cleverer now than they were 2 years ago?
I'm not saying they're not that cleverer. I'm saying if you go back 2 years ago, there were still real serious issues with the exams then, and I think the whole thing needs to be looked at. But you can't say our children are getting cleverer and, dumbing down the achievements of these children.
I was being a bit sarcastic when I said that. I mean, it represents the most extraordinary increase. Look, can I just ask you? Can I just ask you, Christine?
I'm going to butt in because these children, right? They've been disadvantaged 2 years of absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Right. It's not ideal. It doesn't differentiate. But what else? What other outcomes could you see? What would you have done yourself that would have been any different?
Well, Gavin Williamson says they should be rewarded for the difficult time they've been through at school. So give everybody gold medals, say that everyone's a winner, and isn't that wonderful? But life isn't really like that, is it? And what I want to know, all right, even if I accept that this has all happened because of exceptional circumstances, what I want to know is, and there you are in the education system, what ideas need to go to government so that we can get back to a system that does differentiate between the really exceptional and the not so?
Well, I think what Tom said, let's get back to the exams as soon as possible. But I do think the exam system needs an overhaul. And I do think there's merit in universities holding their own exams as well to differentiate with those children. And I do believe there's a huge merit in apprenticeships, degree-based apprenticeships. There's some fabulous opportunities out there.
Yep.
And they shouldn't be sniffed at. I think the whole thing, this is a perfect storm. Let's get in there and change it. And I think there's not a teacher in the country that doesn't want to do something about this now.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.